It looks like something cool, like in San Francisco, but in San Francisco you have hills and there's an actual geographical need. Here I don't see the geographical need for another waterfront mode of transportation when we just got the ferry service here. Just fix and improve what we have instead of making something new. It's a solution looking for a problem. That's like pretty much the best quote I've heard about the BQX. I think it's appalling and actually made me feel uneasy thinking about how further segregating it would be for a lot of our communities that are already working on not being so segregated. If it's about white gentrification and you want to get specific about white privilege and open up that discussion, I believe that that's what BQX is kind of driving home to people in an indirect way, which is why there's a strong feeling of aversion to the project. Why do I think this is happening? Because it serves the developers who are investing big money in small communities like ours. We should improve the MTA buses. They're great. Your phones work on it. They're reliable. But this is now like a very slick, segregating, particularly privileged mode of transportation that doesn't actually serve at least our community.
I don't think it's a good thing. Again, I just look at it as a way of raising real estate prices for those that can afford to come into the neighborhood and eventually price other people out the neighborhood, and it's only going to serve a selected route. I think the money could be used better. But when it prices people out, that can't be a good thing. So, yeah. Those that moved out, where are they going to afford to go? I mean, there are people that lived in neighborhoods maybe 20, 30 years and are being forced out and rents are not coming down, so where can they possibly go? So, I mean, when you look at some of the homeless people out there, and I look at the homeless, maybe the elderly homeless, I look at them differently. Why are they out there? By no choice of their own, or maybe they can't afford any place else to go to. So it's just, gentrification is not a good thing. We're all in this fight together. The strength in numbers, and we just have to hold our politicians accountable. People need a decent place to live at a reasonable price, not affordable. Affordable seems to be a bad word, because affordable for whom? But a reasonable price for people to live. So.
I remember living here, well, not me, I was just a young little boy in Columbia Street, and my grandmother lived across the street where now there are no buildings. And so they tore down all of the buildings for a lot of Puerto Ricans. I'm Puerto Rican. Not only did they take away her home, but they took away her dignity. And I don't want that to happen to Red Hook. I don't want to see people be taken away from somewhere where they've already made home. It's just not fair.
It's not good for the community, it's not good for anybody, especially where we have plenty of transportation in this community as it is. If you want to spend $2.5 billion, I advise people to spend it on more transportations, more subways.
And the BQX is not good for our community. We don't have enough electricity. Underground is water. It's going to make a vibration to mess up all these old houses. It's not a good idea, 100%.
I've been in New York for 23 years. We need it right now. So we're really going to need it in the 8-year process, 10-year process for it to happen. So I would say yes. I think solving public transportation is a really important process, especially with our overpopulation that's happening in New York right now. It's serious. And I'm really excited about the waterfront as well and the use of the ferries. So if this is a continuation of that and trying to figure out a new way to connect the communities of Brooklyn, of New York, I'm all for it.
I think it would be pretty cool, traveling by the water, and you get to go to Queens much faster than the bus, because the bus takes forever, and be able to see, instead of going to Manhattan, I'll be going to Queens now. Just knowing that it's coming and we got a different way to get, you know, from here to there, it seems to be positive. So I'm for it.
I think it would be a great idea. Yes, it would bring up expenses, but already the subway is pretty expensive, and it's opportunity cost with the time that you take to get into the city and have to go into Queens if you're coming from Brooklyn. So, you know, I think it would be a great idea to connect the two and not have to even go through New York City at all. Especially with some not as popular main rails, they have construction, or, you know, they take a while, they'll have delays, whereas like 405, 23, they'll go to basic places in Brooklyn where, you know, may not come to me. Or so I think it would help out a lot.
I work here at Red Beard Bikes, or a local bike shop in DUMBO. It sounds pretty awesome. I'm not a huge fan of the MTA or the G train, so having other means of getting from Brooklyn to Queens would be really awesome. I usually end up going into the city being Manhattan, just to get to Queens, and I go pretty frequently because I have a lot of friends and stuff in Queens. So I don't know, personally, I find it way easier if I could just circumvent Manhattan altogether without taking the G train. Anything to take away business from the MTA would be awesome. Yeah, that's the dream. They are a terribly run organization, and they are ruining public transportation in the city. So if you go into a subway, that's pretty much all the experience you need. It's overcrowded. It's always a long wait for a train. It's a really unpleasant experience. It seems like nothing ever changes. I've been here for 20 years and I haven't seen a single improvement.
The idea behind it is to have some sort of way to get people from, you know, Queens to Brooklyn along the waterfront that isn't served by existing trains or buses, although there are some buses that run along that route. So the upside is obvious, right? It's a nice way to get around. The downside is also obvious. Who's going to pay for it? According to the city, it'll pay for itself. And the way that it makes this argument is through something called value capture, where you take the increased value of the property and the increased property taxes that are coming in and use that to pay off whatever bonds you sold to pay for building the streetcar, right? It's great, a win-win situation. Except that depends on those property tax revenues actually coming in. And that's where this project started to run into some problems. Obviously, the neighborhoods most at risk would be Red Hook and Sunset Park, because those are the neighborhoods that are already, you know, sort of starting to see some new development, but still have a lot of folks there who could not afford the kind of prices that developers are going to want to charge. You know, I think it's one of the defining characteristics of New York in our time. How do we build a city that is an attractive place to live without then drawing in so many new people that it drives out all the people who made it a good place to live in the first place?